Hello, and welcome to your subject, SOCH111, The History of Healing. I'm Dr. Kate Broderick, and I'm going to be one of your lecturers this semester, along with Thomas Crooks in Perth and also Dr. Melissa Rangitakatu in Melbourne. And I'm coming to you from the wild and woolly end of winter in the Adelaide Hills, coming to you from outside today, just for a change. So this is your introduction to the subject in this video, and then your lectures for session 1 will follow on in your LMS from there. So I wanted to start off talking about what history is, because history is, it's perhaps necessarily a rather subjective thing. A history is told by a human being who has biases, and there is no such thing as a complete history. And so, of necessity, history will cherry pick the things that it wants to talk about and will tend to leave behind the things that it doesn't wish to talk about according to the perspective of the person telling the story. And so as a definition of history here from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, history is a tale or a story, a chronological record of significant events as affecting a nation or institution, often including an explanation of their causes. So why do we study history, and why is it relevant, particularly in the study of medicine or complementary and alternative medicine, which you've come to study? So here's a quote from Plato's Republic that starts to open the door to answering that question of why is it that we study history. From Plato: "You amuse me, you who seem worried that I impose impractical studies upon you. It does not only reside with mediocre minds, but all men have difficulty in persuading themselves that it is through these studies, as if with instruments, that one purifies the eye of the soul, and that one causes a new fire to burn in this organ, which was obscured as though extinguished by the shadows of the other sciences. An organ whose conservation is more important than 10,000 eyes, since it is by it alone that we contemplate the truth." So imagine being a healer in historical times and trying to help the suffering of your fellow humans, but not knowing anything about basic biology or chemistry, not knowing what a cell is or a molecule or an element or a bacteria or a virus, not knowing anything about human anatomy other than what you might have seen from severe injuries that opened a view into the body, perhaps battlefield injuries. Not knowing that the heart is responsible for pumping blood through the vessels, or that the nervous system controls muscle movement, or that there is any such thing as homeostasis. How would you make sense of it all and help to provide assistance to the sick or the injured? And I want to encourage you to keep that question in mind as we travel through the next 13 weeks. So the history of healing, this subject, is the story of healing and medicine over time in the human realm. It will draw out common threads across different cultures and different civilizations. And as I mentioned on the last slide, it is a selective history. It is limited in scope. So this is the story of medicine over time in the human realm, the story of how humans have made sense of their bodies, minds, emotions, and spirits, as well as disease, healing, cure, and death throughout human history. There is a whole other sphere of health, illness, injury, recovery, and death that occurs in nature, or that exists in nature amongst plants and animals, whereby nature, with little or no intervention by what we would call healing practices or medicine, has affected the survival of uncountable non-human species. So the idea of medicine, of bringing some intervention to bear in the case of illness or injury, in order to effect a healing or cure and avoid death, is a uniquely human idea. And I will leave you to contemplate from your own perspective all of the many reasons why humans have been driven throughout time to solve the puzzle of illness and death in order to avoid or overcome it. One of the most compelling things about studying the history of medicine is the chance to look at common ideas and threads that have woven themselves throughout so many different cultures. And whether through humans in different cultures viewing human health and disease and the laws of nature through similar perspectives and arriving at similar theories and frameworks, or through the spread of information, mostly verbally for most of human history, in the mixing of populations over time, the commonalities of healing philosophy and practice throughout history are remarkable. And it is important that we not lose those traditions as we turn to a modern conventional approach of modern medicine. So because this subject is about the history of medicine, it focuses on historical developments in medicine and related aspects of historical life, such as hygiene or public health, rather than focusing on the whole of history itself. Some historical backdrop will be given in the subject, but we won't have a seamless or comprehensive coverage of history and historical civilizations. That would be really vast and too large of a task for a single subject as this one. So we will focus entirely on the major cultures, civilizations, and medical systems that contributed to what we know now as the full range of medicine and healing today, and that are more widely recognized rather than the more obscure systems that might also exist. To give you a little bit of an overview as to the flow of the semester is divided up by sessions and weeks, as you can see in your subject outline, and your subject coordinator will go through the subject outline in your LMS setup with you in the tutorial video for session 1. I'm just going to give you an overview of the way that the material flows throughout this semester. So in week 1, we have introduction and general topics, and this is before we actually will dive into the historical stuff. In sessions 3 through 7, we're covering indigenous traditional healing, which is mostly tribal forms of healing, although it's not all of the tribal forms of healing. As you'll see in further sessions, a lot of our historical systems started out as tribal forms of healing. In sessions 8 through 10, we're going to cover the whole medical systems from Eastern historical civilizations. And then from sessions 11 through 16, we're going to cover the roots of modern complementary and conventional Western medicines. And then from session 17 to 26, we're going to cover modern systems of practice and the specific histories that adhere to those modern systems. So you'll note that different types of information and levels of detail are provided for the different cultures of medicine throughout the semester. And this is in large part driven by what information is available in the scholarly or other reliable resources for traditional medicines, as well as the breadth of each system. So much of what we will explore happened either before written records or in cultures of an oral healing tradition, or if it was after the advent of written records, in some places where some of those records have been destroyed, usually as a side effect of warfare or invading forces as different populations have invaded each other. So history is really by its nature selective, as I've mentioned, and we'll never know the whole of the truth. And so we will each find different things that are compelling and that make a mark on us as we travel through what is known and as we imagine what is not known. One thing I want to mention quickly about the organization of the material, we will refer to dates this semester as BCE for before the Common Era and CE as the Common Era rather than BC and AD, which is the way they've been referred to previously. So I just wanted to note that. And I also wanted to note for you that you have a History of Healing timeline reference that will help you stay oriented to where we are in the world and in our timeline as you travel through the semester. So you might want to print that out and keep it next to you while you're studying or while you're watching your lectures, just to help to orient you to where we are in any particular part of the world or period of time in each session's lecture. So your learning outcomes are listed on your subject outline, and they're listed here on this slide. I'm not going to read them as you are capable of reading them yourself, but it's worth saying that, that it is important that you understand the learning outcomes from this from your subject outline, because they will help you understand the pitch of the material and what it is that you're meant to take away from the material. And so so this subject is not about memorizing dates or historical events. It's about gaining an understanding of how the philosophies and theories and practices of all the things we now call medicine evolved into being how they are now, and experiencing the really rich texture of tradition and science and how they've combined to become modern medicine. And that's both conventional and complementary or alternative medicine. And we'll talk about those terms later on this week. So I encourage you, as you go through your readings and your lecture recordings each week, to not get too distracted or too focused on the fine details. The volume of the material in this subject is large, as it is with any 4-credit point subject, but the goal is not to remember all the details in this subject. So as compared to, say, anatomy and physiology, where you need to remember all the details for your assessments. The goal in this subject is to let the major themes and the contexts over time really sink in, and to stimulate you to think about historical culture, economic and societal drivers that have changed medicine over time, and to realize that even today there are cultural, economic, and societal drivers that are still driving medicine to evolve, oftentimes through conflict, as in the past. So use the detail presented in your lectures to stimulate a felt sense in your own mind or in your own body of what those times and what those people were like, what their struggles and joys might have been, and how health and healing played a role in their lives, as well as illness and death, because those are all very important things. And that will help you to focus on the things that are important for this subject, rather than getting distracted or overwhelmed by all of the historical details. So I just want to emphasize that one more time. This is not about memorizing all the details of history or the details of these systems of medicine. And so if you find yourself getting overwhelmed by the amount of material or the amount of detail in the material, just take a breath and let the themes wash over you, and let the details go. Let the felt sense of these people's lives historically really sink into your being. And away we go. I will see you in your first lecture. Thanks for joining.